and share my screen. And, I'm going to absolutely welcome everybody to today. Today's weekly roundtable, weekly moment is an interesting one because I really wanted to talk about sustainability and transformation, and the relationship between these two things. And it's so broad. I mean, it's incredibly broad. There is so much to this conversation that it's no wonder that an awful lot of people that are in the world of transformation, in particular digital transformation, are trying to grapple with where the heck do we start with this. So all I wanted to do today was just to bring 5 things of consideration. So I think what I want to do is just sort of, I guess, just to frame today's weekly roundtable is less about the detail and the examples, but more about the high level, because I think it's really important for us to get our head around the high level of this because it is so broad. And then perhaps maybe we'll have another session in the next few weeks to really talk a little bit more about the practice and the delivery of that. So that's how I'm framing today's session. And I did say to everybody 5 things to consider, but as always, I haven't got 5, I've got 6 things to consider, because that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But I think one bit to start off with, one area to start for me, is this sense of transformation and sustainability. Are they friend or foe? Especially if we're thinking about the world of digital transformation. And Stacey, for you in your world, a lot of people can feel that digital technology is actually counterintuitive when it comes to sustainability. So how do you create congruence between those two things? And there's a lot of opinion and a lot of thought around, really, are they friends or foe? And absolutely, from my perspective, they're definite. They're in bed together, they're having a great relationship with each other, and that's what we need to understand and really really get on with it. But there is complexity, because there's nothing tangible for us as modern leaders and practitioners to hang on to, because we don't necessarily have regulation, we don't have policy. We know that something like sustainability added into transformation immediately has direct implication on those things. And and all of a sudden, the stakes become quite high in terms of bringing these two things together. So there is, there is a fogginess. We're going through a moment of time where there's a little bit of fogginess between these two things. But what I think is really positive is that there is now definition around what we mean by sustainable transformation or sustainable project management. These things are starting to emerge, and I think that's great. And I've just got some things in here. The green project management, responsible project management as an institution is growing really, really fast. And I think if you haven't looked at responsible project management as an organization and as a website, then go and have a look, because they're doing some great things, and there's some really good insights and tools that we can use. So I think at last, I feel as if the fog is lifting a wee bit, and there's murmurs out there that are helping us to understand. Notwithstanding, everybody's trying to own the definition of what sustainable transformation and what sustainable project management means. They're trying to own it, and I don't think there is any ownership of it, and that's the whole point of it. You can see with sustainable project management, it's all about the entire life cycle. It's positive environmental, social, and economic impact. Get that? Great. Some people talk about people, purpose, and profit, but how does that apply for us in public service? Profit doesn't really necessarily come into our strategy and our objectives. So how do we play in with that? So what I've got on this slide is I've just got different elements of what people are saying sustainable transformation means. And I guess there's also something else as well, which is if you go and just have a look at sustainability, even devoid of the word transformation, have you guys heard of reduce, reuse, and recycle as the 3 R's of sustainability? Yeah, most people have. Did you know that there are more R's than these 3? Yeah, Helen, brilliant. Can you name any of them? I'm putting you on the spot.
You're going to put me on the spot now.
That's not nice.
Well, I believe that one of them is refuse. So it's about not bringing waste, or well, in terms of either business or domestic situations, not bringing in waste. So netting out your impact at source. And then I'll stop there before I embarrass myself.
No, don't. It's cool. But you know, the majority of people only know these first 3 R's. But when these first 3 R's came into play, an additional 3 R's came in, and it's reevaluate, redistribute, and relations, as in human relations. Now, Stacey, you can start seeing now all of a sudden, oh, you know, these feel relevant to transformation and to digital, which is great. But there's also another 3. There's 9 R's to sustainability, and the last 3 are resilience, reassessment, and restructure. And what you were talking about, that refuse, is the redistribute, Helen. So in terms of its definition, so you're absolutely right, just slightly different word. These are the 9 R's of sustainability. And for me, when I look at these 9, I suddenly think to myself, you know what? I've got anchors here. I can see congruence with transformation and digital transformation, because a lot of these words now make sense to me. And I think that's really important, because that's a positive thing. When we're talking about reevaluation, we're talking about reevaluation of resources. Again, you know, these are conversations we can have around transformation and digital transformation. Redistribution, in the phrase of the 9 R's, redistribution is about income, but actually, what about redistribution of resource and skill in digital transformation and future workforce? Relations, in terms of improving relations, that's, you know, user adoption testing, that's engagement, employee experience, user experience, people, human relation. Resilience, in terms of adaptability, that's another thing that I think is, you know, I mean, I don't know about you, but that's front and center in every digital transformation, our ability to build resilience at a human level so that we can adapt, because digital transformation isn't necessarily an end state goal. Reassessment of scale and value. This is something that I think is really interesting. And restructuring of economy. And there's something in here, restructuring of the economy, for me. I think it's not just economy, it's also economic, it's also education, you know, it's also environment. So it's the restructuring of our external environment and bringing all of these things in. How do we restructure them? So all of a sudden, I kind of, you know, when I see these 9 R's, I think, yeah, you know what, we can have a conversation with the guys in planning around digital transformation, because we can bring some of this language in. We can bring sustainability as a narrative into our world. So that just gives us a little bit of a frame of positioning in terms of the reality of the world that we're in, is that there is still lack of regulation, lack of acceptance, lack of regulation, policy, and rules around sustainable transformation or sustainability in transformation. But equally, what I think is great is that the world is changing, and I think the world is changing fast. So it's really good. And to know those 9 R's is just, you know, for me, gold dust in anybody that's working in transformation. So what I want to do now is just literally just take everybody in remembering just high level today, right? So it's a little bit of a theory session today more than anything else. What are the 5 things that I think we should be considering when it comes to bringing sustainability and merging it into our transformation? And I think, you know, the first thing to recognize is absolutely everything is connected. Everything is connected. Anything that we are doing vis-a-vis transformation or digital transformation has got some sort of connectivity into areas of sustainability, either the human or ethics, or the environment. And we start all of our work with what we call the 3 tenets that you can see up here. And the first one is, which I just think is a lovely sustainable repositioning for digital transformation, is to stop talking about it as a noun and start talking about it as a verb. So it's not that we are doing digital transformation, it's that we are becoming a digitally transforming human system. And all of a sudden, you've got some of those 9 R's coming in, you know, resilience, restructuring, et cetera, et cetera. So thinking about us being an evolving, digitally transforming human system is a really interesting reframe for digital transformation. And of course, what that then does is that it allows us to lean into that, you know, that element of modern leadership that's important to us, role modeling. How do we role model? Because in order for us to become digitally transforming, we need to be experimental in our practice, and we need to have early adopters. And the second one is humanity and community. And this is where our practice as human-centered leaders comes into play. Now, humanity is about the human and beyond, isn't it? And community is what we tend to talk about rather than culture. Because if we can foster and bond people with a sense of community, then we are able to build resilience around a transformation. So we're looking at safety and well-being, sustainability. We're looking at the networked effect. So not the ecosystem, but the ecosystem. And if we're connecting things, that's sustainability. That's what we're doing in our restructuring. For sustainability, we're creating networks and connections and ecosystems. And finally, what we call regeneration. And within regeneration for us, the third tenet in our framework, regeneration is about the ethics and sustainability. So it's basically it's splitting into two. And if you want to know a lot more about regeneration conceptually, especially in public service, perhaps, Stacey, is go and have a look at what the guys in New Zealand have done. And the old innovation lab in New Zealand did some fantastic work around regeneration. And there's also an organization in New Zealand called Datacom. They're a big data organization, a global organization. But around about 6 years ago, there was a couple of people, Taryn Ellis and a guy called Kerry Top, and they came together within Datacom as an organization, and they created their own innovation lab around regeneration. And they've got some materials around how they use this in the guise of transformation, which is really interesting, in geographical areas. So they went into geographical areas around New Zealand. They went into New Plymouth, and they also went into the north part of the South Island. And they did these regenerative initiatives within the community around ethical practice and sustainability, bringing conscious leadership into all of the businesses and public services. Really, really interesting. So for us, this sense of regeneration is something that is really important for us to be thinking about. So these are the 3 tenets, and what they do is they help us really understand that everything is connected, because a lot of us are talking about community and maybe culture work. A lot of us are talking about becoming more human-centered in our leaders, in our learning and development. But you know, that in order for you to do that, we need to be more digital. We need to have role models. So the digitally transforming comes into play. And actually, for us to truly be regenerative, to be more ethical and sustainable, again, we need to be human-centered. We need role models. We need digital. So the interplay between these 3, the connectivity between these 3 is vital. So I think right at the very start, we've already got these 3 tenets that can give us some anchors. And of course, for us, in our work, we have this belief statement, which is the gift of the age we live in, is our ability to reconnect with our humanity using digital and data for the good of people and planet. And that's what our work is all about. And it needs all 3 of these tenets. So anybody that's working on digital transformation, yeah, you're damn right. Sustainability and ethical practice is part of what you do. People that are working in the purity of sustainable practices, they need the other 3 tenets too. So it's a really, really good way of looking at bringing the 2 things together. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the second thing, is a duality of focus. And what do I mean by duality of focus? When we're thinking about transformation and sustainability, what we want to do is we want to think about 2 things. We want to think about impact. And I think impact is something that is a it's part of the familiar narrative of sustainability, isn't it? Net zero impact, our impact on the environment, how how our decisions here are having an impact. I don't know about you, but the sense of that word impact just feels, yeah, that's part of the narrative, the sustainability. But what about legacy? Legacy is something that isn't always associated with sustainability, but really, really important. So what do I mean by legacy? If we look at the human element of sustainability and the planet, the environmental part of sustainability, what we do is we start to see a story. And the story has got a past, and it's got a present, and it's got a future. And this comes into a lot of our community work as well. So when we're thinking about bringing sustainability into transformation, thinking about planet and people, so environment and human, legacy is what we really ought to be thinking about, the actual story. So environmentally and from a human perspective, there is an origin story. So for example, Stacey, with you, before you start green lighting a digital transformation initiative or a project, the people that will be, the people that will be impacted by that are already in that environment. They were there before the project. So what is it about them that we need to understand right at the very start? And then we've got the moment of now, which is where we are delivering transformation. But beyond that, then we've got the future story and the legacy, because digital transformation, when it is projects and programs, does have an end state. So what is the sustain? What are we leaving? What legacy are we leaving these people? How are we able to support them to continue on that legacy? And this is very much the work of Owen Eastwood when he talks about, understand the origin story, understand then the impact of the decisions that you're making, but also recognize and create what the future story is, that sustain story. So you've got this constant shift between past, present, and future, the legacy story. People don't spend time doing this. And one of the things that we've noticed in our work is when you bring people together and you get them to talk about the human and the environment in terms of the legacy story, it brings out some really powerful things, and people can start to create their own values and purpose for transformation. They can connect to it. They have a sense of belonging, and belonging brings sense of community. Really, really interesting. So if you'd like to know more about that, I would suggest that you go to the work of Owen Eastwood, and he's got a great book out that is actually called Belonging, and he talks about this trajectory of past, present, and future. And when you think about it at a cultural level, there's some really amazing stories out there in terms of thinking about Australia and the indigenous cultures there, in Canada and America and New Zealand, the indigenous cultures that were there, that with origin story. And then we had colonialism coming along, and people discovering new lands and bringing in their now. But what impact did that have? They didn't understand the origin story, so they brought the impact of what they thought was right. Things like religion. They thought that was, the right thing to do was to cultivate and to gentrify what they thought were people just, living with, in the wilds, in the bush. But actually now what we're seeing is we're actually seeing the adverse effect in terms of future and legacy. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's a really interesting concept of bringing legacy focus into our transformation, as well as the most obvious of all, which is impact. And then is what we call the 4 Ps. And before I say anything else, the one thing that I will say is, if you are bringing sustainability into transformation, the thing to remember is this: sustainability is inclusive. Every single individual can take a tiny action today to be more sustainable in the way that they operate and in the way that they think. Sustainability is inclusive. You know, just reflecting on that sentence it can be really, really powerful. So what we tend to do when we're thinking about the duality element of legacy and impact is we tend to look at these four elements. And I know, you know, people do talk about, as I mentioned earlier on, people, profit and planet. But for us, there's four things. So, you know, purpose, very, very obvious. You know, what is our purpose? How are we being purposeful? And I've just come off a call talking about purpose with a bunch of practitioners, and, you know, just saying, when you're thinking about purpose, you've got organizational purpose, you've got purpose of transformation, and you've got human purpose as well, individual and collective purpose. Purpose isn't a thing. It's actually quite complex. And what we need to do as modern leaders in transformation and sustainably responsible leaders is we want to make sure that there's congruence between all of those, you know, those areas of purpose, and not dissonance. Because when there's dissonance, there's limiting belief, there's resistance, there's, you know, there's worry, there's conflict, there's friction. So really, really interesting. Planet and people, I think are self-explanatory. The only one that I wanted to bring up was produce. And what I mean by that is, what are we producing? Because we could be producing a service, we could be producing a product, we could be producing an experience. But if we understand what we are producing and think about legacy and impact in terms of what we are producing, vis-a-vis project management or transformation, then that brings in another dimension. So thinking about legacy and impact across those four areas, rather than the more traditional three, can actually open up some really, really, really interesting things, which I think is important. So just coming into the chat here, reflecting on the principal links, very much how people will continue to respond to without a doubt, Stacey, absolutely. You know, and I think that there's something that there's something about us thinking, what do we want people to do in and with our transformation? There's another thing to think about. How do we want people to take this transformation and evolve this transformation beyond our project and program, which is where I think the magic of bringing sustainable transformation together comes into play. I would absolutely 100% agree with that comment. The fourth thought that I want to give everybody is this: role modeling sustainability is absolutely key. We can all do it. Everybody can be a role model of sustainable transformation. And the other thing as well is, most of our customers talk about digital champions. And I think that's brilliant. But, you know, we also have data champions, and also we should have sustainable or responsible champions. Because if we can build an ecosystem around these champions that we bring into transformation and digital transformation, not just purely having digital champions, but having data champions and sustainable or responsible champions, what we've got then is we've got people seeded in our human system that are actually championing early adopter. Then we've got others that are championing ethics and challenging the why and the purpose of what we're doing things. And then we've got other people that are really making sure that the quality of data rather than the quantity of data is being managed. So actually having that triad of champions rather than just the pure digital champions is really, really important. So, you know, for me, another thing is sustainable leadership is inclusive. Nobody needs to go on a development program to become a sustainable leader. We can start doing it straight away. What I didn't realize was that there is a mindset. There is a mindset. So there's been a huge piece of research, and I've got the link down the bottom of the screen here. There's been a lot of research around what does a sustainable mindset look like. And what's interesting is that this slide, so this isn't our work, this is the work that has come out of the research. The mindset of a sustainable leader is that they have a purpose-driven belief that business is not commercial activity divorced of the wider societal and environmental context in which it operates. Now, I think that's great for private enterprise, but what's really interesting here is this is, you know, for public sector, for health and social care, for charity sectors, This is the mindset of the majority of individuals that are working in you know, that it's so purpose driven in terms of, you know, why we are doing things. So we're a tiny little edge away from everybody being able to adopt this mindset if we just think about that. The piece of research also stated that 3 profiles, 3 types of sustainable leader are present in your systems right now, in your human systems, in your networks, in your ecosystem, in your organizations. You have profile 1, which is the born believer, which is basically the person that's going, I'm an environmental activist, you know, and I'm like, you know, it's just a little bit like the early adopters. And that's great. And they're the obvious ones that we go with. But there are also those that are a little bit more quiet, who are what they call the convinced. I'm convinced this is the right thing to do. I'm not too sure how to do it, but I am convinced. These people are really important for us to recognize and for us to identify in our systems, because the people that are convinced that this is the right thing to do, their voice is a trusted voice. Because I can guarantee you, the born believers are what are in terms of profile, are innovators or early adopters. And late majority and laggards do not trust them, because the curve of innovation of change, which goes in, you'll know this, innovator, early adopter, early majority, late majority, and laggard. We know that in terms of the way that our neural pathways are, in terms of how our brain works, we only trust the audience that is next to ours. So the innovators are trusted by the early adopters. The early majority don't trust the innovators, they trust the early adopters. So understanding these 3 profiles is actually really important for us to embed and bake sustainability into our transformation and breed success. So the convinced people are really important. And then the third audience that came up for them was the audience that they recognized as the awoken, the people that had the aha moment. Oh my God, I didn't realize that. I didn't, you know, I've always used a pen and paper. I had no idea how much of the impact that could have. Blimey, you know, now that you've just said that, I'm onto it. You know, it's that kind of the people that are having the aha moment. Again, those people that have the aha moment, really important for us, because they can bring the majority on board. They bring the majority of the system on us. So thinking about our champions, thinking about them in these 3 profiles can really expedite and accelerate sustainable transformation. Amazing, isn't it? And as always, what is important is this: role modeling and using those champions, if we can identify them in our system as role models, gives us what we call the domino effect or the ripple effect. We want them to just work on and to work with and to support just the people around them, their first followers, and then they then go on to their second followers. What we're doing is we're creating a tipping point. So it's not going out and trying to get everybody to be sustainable. What this is about identifying the people that are, you know, the born believers, the convinced and the awoken, and getting them to just go into a ripple effect. And that's all we're after, because if we can get 16.5% of people thinking and practicing like this, and this isn't for sustainable transformation, this is for any transformational project. What happens is we tip over and the project becomes less about a project and it becomes more about a people movement. And that's the magic of success, of transformation, is when projects and programs at a user level don't feel like projects and programs. They just feel like an evolution of who we are, and it feels good and it feels purposeful, and I feel happy, and I want to be on the journey. Really important. The penultimate bit, the final thing that I wanted to share with you was this, and this is a really important part of our work when we work with organizations to help them to humanize transformation, is to think strategically about how we can be human driven in our strategic narrative and focus. So if you think very, very simply around your current transformation or digital transformation or whatever project or program you might be working on, has it got a vision? Tick. Have you got a strategy around how you're going to deliver that vision? Tick. Probably got more than one strategy. Visions and strategies are organizationally driven. They connect with the structure of your organization, the technical area. They are part of the mechanics of your organization. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, if we want to succeed in transformation, and certainly if we want to succeed in sustainable transformation, we need to do a repositioning before we go out to our people. And the repositioning that we do with customers is we reposition and pivot what the great visions and strategies that they've got into moonshots and missions. And the very moment you articulate a vision as a moonshot, or your strategic plans individually or collectively as missions, you connect with a human. It's a little hack, and it works right at the very heart of transformation. So what do I mean by moonshots and missions? What we tend to do is we tend to work, instead of reinventing the wheel, on the work of Mariana Mazzucato. And Mariana Mazzucato is part of the IIPP department. She runs the department in the University College London. And she's done some great work, and she is an advisor of quite a lot of governments. She's done some work with Australia, New Zealand, here in the UK at the moment, also doing a lot of work with the NHS here in the UK at the moment as well. But she's also written a book. I need to tell you that. She's written a book, and a book is called The Mission Economy. Really easy read, really powerful read for anybody in sustainable transformation or digital transformation, wanting to be sustainable as well. Amazing. And her work talks about how we create moonshots and then missions towards achieving our moonshot. And what is lovely is she gives the story of John F. Kennedy. Now, if you listen to the speech that John F. Kennedy gave when he announced to the American citizens that we're going to put a man on the moon in the next 10 years, if you listen to that speech, he wasn't sharing a vision and a strategy. He was sharing a moonshot. And he captured the hearts and minds of the people immediately. He delivered a moonshot speech, not a visionary speech. Really interesting. And then the way that they recognized that they were, the way that they knew, the only way they knew that they would be able to achieve that moonshot was to restructure, was to reevaluate the way that big complex projects worked, and also to restructure and to reevaluate the relationship between state and business. And that stuff, that example has been picked up by Mariana Mazzucato and her team in UCL, and they have created moonshot guides for all of us to be able to use to create this repositioning. And a little bit of a video there for you to have a look at afterwards. But essentially, what she talks about is grand challenges. It doesn't matter how small or how technical a project is, it can directly link to a grand challenge. It can directly link to a grand challenge. And talking about what a grand challenge is in a moment is really important. But the way that we design transformation around moonshot and missions is slightly different. So I'll just explain this very, very briefly to you. If you've got a digital transformation or a transformation or an initiative that's got a vision, if you're able to successfully reposition that to a moonshot, aka just connect it to an SDG, all of a sudden it's a moonshot because it's got purpose. And also, the other element of repositioning a vision to a moonshot is create belief statements. So our vision for our transformation is la la la. If you're able to take that vision and repurpose it into a belief statement that you can even give and encourage your leaders to talk about, we believe that in order to you're connecting with humans, because it's human language. It's not mechanical language. It's human language. It's amazing how you look at the neuroscience of adoption, user adoption, and it's fascinating. So that, you know, thinking about, you've got your moonshot, then what happens is this: based on that moonshot, you identify your missions. So what missions they are. And the way that you identify your missions is not what resources have we got. You don't look at now or the past. You just create your missions. You create them. This is brainstorming. This is design work. You create your missions. Then what you do, which is why I think this is lovely, because it speaks to so many of the 9 R's, is you go cross-sectoral. Not just cross-divisional, you go cross-sectoral. And that's how that original moonshot and missions of NASA was able to put a man on the moon within 10 years, because they did that. They identified their missions for the moonshot, then they went cross-sectoral. So they went out to engineering, they went out, you know, think about DARPA, you know, they went out to academia, they worked with economists, they had to, everything came into it. So what's really interesting here is that I don't know how your transformation is structured. I don't know how your initiatives are currently structured, but more often than not, what happens is we create the plan, and then we say, okay, we're going to need to go out to tender. So we need somebody to do technology. We need a technology provider or a supplier to do this, and we need somebody else to do that. Or what we've actually done is we've stovepiped our transformation. We haven't actually allowed it to be mission orientated. So the work of Mariana, what she's saying is, if we go cross-sectoral at that point of mission, and we bring in and we go and have conversations, and it's not just with community, it's with education, it's with, you know, technology about the future, it's with the economists, you know, and bringing them together. And then out of there, that is where innovation comes. Innovation comes out of the cross-sectoral conversation. And then you are at a point where you start to look at, okay, what projects drop out of this? It's a really interesting reframe for how we, you know, we build and we approach our governance and our you know, our high-level strategy around that. So I've mentioned to you the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That is a really, really easy way for us to start to create it. Honestly, the simplest of project. It could be deployment of Office 365. We can create a moonshot around that and missions around that, directly related to so many of these. I mean, just look at what we've got here, you know, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality. Those 3 directly potential relation to something as simple as a project of deployment of Office 365. So much we can do to tap into these. I think there's what's also important for me is these 17 SDGs, there's another way of looking at them, which is looking at the happiness SDG pyramid. And I'm sorry that this is a low res image. I cannot get a high res image of this, but this is another way of looking at the sustainability goals in terms of the happiness pyramid. So you've got 2 that are predominantly spiritual, so really, really high level purpose. Then you've got 5 that are very driven at an ecological level, and then underneath that, people. I think what's so incredibly important about this is it means that we could potentially have a spiritual, ecological, and people SDG for digital transformation project or program that we're working on, so that we're tapping into all 3 of those lenses in terms of the pyramid. I find that a really fascinating play when I'm working and helping organizations and customers, you know, think about how they reposition from moonshot to mission. I mentioned that there was 6 things I was going to share with you rather than the 5 things. I know it's kind of like brain stuff, isn't it? I told you it's a little bit of a theory and kind of like, you know, mind work today. But the last thing I just wanted to share with everybody was this, you know, start over strategy. In the next few weeks, we've got a gentleman called Neil Campbell, who is fantastic. He does nothing but work in sustainability and transformation and project management. So he is a real kind of advocate and driver of this. And he says start over strategy. If you want to bring sustainability into your transformation, just get people doing things within your project team, just start to have conversations at a user level, just getting conversations going, just do something. Start over strategy is the first bit. And for us, in terms of our approach in the Dylan way, everything that we do is about starting small, micro shifts. That's why we use the word quantum. Quantum shift, which is microscopic, has quantum impact, which is a massive macro impact. And if we can get people to understand that micro shifts contribute to macro impact, we've got exactly the same situation as the original example of putting a man on the moon, when the president is walking through NASA and he sees the cleaner and he asks them what his job was, and what does the cleaner say to him? He says, I am helping put a man on the moon. Micro shifts, understanding congruent with macro impact, so incredibly important. We try and help leaders to talk about set points instead of goals when it comes to this stuff, because transformation, I mean, Stacey, you'll know this, digital transformation, it's a moving beast, isn't it? You can't just put things set in stone. What we're doing now, a 2-year program, it's going to look different next year because the world around us is changing. So what we tend to do is we tend to talk about set points. We also are big advocates of OKRs, objective key results. But set points are really great, because what they are is you say, right, okay, we think this is a good kind of target for us, and we put that target in play. But what we do is instead of saying that's the target, we do a test on the target, and we see whether that target is in our stretch zone rather than our comfort zone. And if we know that it's in our stretch zone, we then agree that that's a set point for now. And then what we do is, as we're going through agile projects and programs and things are slightly iterating, or we've got, maybe in software, we've got incremental design, what we can do is we go back to the set point and we do another test, and we go and we think to ourselves, are we still in stretch, or have we gone beyond it? Can we still actually test to that set point? So not conversation for now, but a really, really interesting way of just thinking of, repositioning goals for a transformation and digital transformation. The thing that I did want to just share with everybody very quickly today was in terms of how legacy and impact can start to emerge and manifest in daily practice. And they can, both of them can emerge in daily practice in 2 areas. The first one is in our unconscious practice, which is micro habits. And the second one is in our conscious practice, which is what we call power up. And a power up is a 1% marginal gain. And in our broad framework, the Dylan way, we have 4 types of power up. We have an effective power up, an energy power up, an experience power up, and an experimental power up. Now, they mean something different directly in the framework, in experience and experiment. But actually, what you can do is you yourself can think, what am I working on today? What meetings have I got today? What work do I have to deliver today? And what you can do is you can power up a conversation, a meeting, or a piece of work that you're delivering by 1% using one of these 4 power ups. And what I love is, and what you can see here is, I've overlaid a sustainable application. Effectiveness. If you are more productive, then there is a sustainable impact. Energy. Am I thinking, just generally speaking about my carbon, thinking about my carbon footprint? I've got a meeting next week, and I've been, do I need to be there in person, or can I do it on Zoom? If we're thinking about the offset energetically on the environment to make some of our decisions, that's a better way than saying, I just can't be bothered because I'm really nice. I love working from home. I don't necessarily know whether I want to go into the office or not. Experiential for me is ethical. Is what I'm saying or doing ethically right for me, for the people around me? And experimental is just experiment with the economics of things, and especially in the moment of time that we're all living in now. So we can experiment with economics, and that creates innovation. So Power-ups are things that we work with all of our customers on achieving that 1% marginal gain. And the thing is this, you power up every day. Every single day you power up just by 1%. It can be a moment, it can be less than 1 minute. But to apply a power-up to every single day means that at the end of a month, you're 30% uplift. By the end of a year, you're up to, you could be 300% uplift. And if you were to think about power-ups being sustainably applied and driven, can you imagine an organizational system and how that can build out into so much wealth? And the other thing for us with power-ups is this: when people create power-ups and they share their power-ups and we start to build a depository of power-ups, what that means is that we've got a wealth of information to share with new people that are joining our organization, or people that are in different areas that might just be starting out with this concept. We've already got examples for them to share honestly, it's a fantastic concept and worked so well with everybody. Of course, this is a public weekly webinar that I do. So there's a public reason why I do this weekly webinar, and it's just to let everybody know that every week, everything that we talk about is one tiny element of our wider framework, which is Humanising Transformation, the Dylan Way. And we have a practitioner leadership academy where we bring leaders around transformation together in this academy to become certified in Humanising Transformation. Why? So that we are not a consultancy, so that we've got an inside-out approach. So it's really, really incredibly important for us. And for me today, the subject of sustainability and transformation is humanising transformation. It is humanising transformation, because humanising transformation is about humanity, people, and planet. And I think there's a really lovely congruence with that. I've popped into the chat there if anybody would like a strategy session. It's in the chat. It's just a free hour with me, but it's just for you. So regardless of whether we've got a relationship, or whether you're already doing some stuff with other people, it's just an opportunity for you to maybe think about your own practice and your own leadership, and and just talk about your own legacy of past, present, and future, and maybe some things that you might want to think about. So, whistle stop tour. I've got a couple of minutes left before I want to gift everybody a little bit of time to breathe, either before your next meeting, or indeed have just share a comment or a question. Summary is this: everything is connected. Everything is connected. So it doesn't matter how pure, small, technical transformation or project is. Everything is connected, and therefore it's connected from a sustainability perspective. Everything is connected because it has an impact on a person, or it has an impact on the environment. There's an origin story for everything that finishes with either a human or the planet. Everything is connected. Therefore, absolutely, there is congruence to bring sustainability into every project and program. Really important for us to see sustainability not just around impact, but to understand that legacy, to understand that story. If we can bring that duality into play, then it's much richer in terms of what we're doing. The application of the 4 Ps, remembering that what are we producing? Are we producing an experience, a product, or a service, rather than the profitability piece that is more established? Understanding that mindset and seeking those champions, again, that starts the people movement. The repositioning of transformation into moonshot and mission, that is another great way to directly bring sustainability into projects and programs. But equally, what that does, and we know this in our work, it brings people on the journey with us. People relate to it. People want to be involved in it. It brings community. And of course, as all things, small is beautiful in our world. Small is beautiful. And it's so incredibly important. So that is a whistle-stop tour of all things, humanizing transformation and bringing sustainability into play. I think, my closing narrative, I guess, for today's session is this: sustainability should not be a trade-off. It shouldn't be well, if we're going to do it, then we won't be able to do something else. I think what we've got to recognize is it's intrinsically connected, and it's into everything. It should not just be baked into strategy, it should be baked into practice, which means that there's no better time than to start now. I also think that it's important for us to recognize that sustainability is part of well-being. we tend to think sustainability is really, you know, it's net zero, circular economy. It's all about the first 3 R's. It's also about humans. It's about well-being, psychological safety, networking. And I say, don't work hard, work happy. You know, how can we help people work happier rather than work harder? And also, I think one thing for us as leaders of transformation is the final piece that I've got here. We need to do what's right in the right way, which means that we have to have and build our own profile and our own resilience for challenge, because there will be a lot of challenge in terms of limiting belief. A lot of people are, you know, respond to change on the past as opposed to being able to lean into the future. So what that means is, around the agenda of transformation, a lot of the time we have to make sure that we're working on our own resilience and our own credibility and reputation, so that we are able to challenge, are we doing what's right and then in the right way, as opposed to let's do things in the right way, which is the accepted way, when we might not be compromising doing the right thing. So it's rather than following the rules. That's really what I'm saying there. So what we have is we've got the ability to generate a more sustainable way of transforming through choice. We can make things more sustainable through our decision making. We can bring a focus of human side of transformation through thinking about that legacy of flow. And we should be more mindful of the future of what we're bringing. Because I think, you know, every time we're thinking about transformation, how often do we think about now and less about future proofing for generations, or for, you know, new workers, the next generation of worker that's coming into our organization? Being mindful of that future legacy is incredibly important, which kind of taps into Owen Eastwood's work. I'm going to stop there because I'm so conscious of the fact that I have just blurted out so much, but, you know, flavors of thought around the interplay between sustainability and transformation is fascinating. But hopefully there's one or two things in what I've shared with you today that will allow you to, you know, think about how you can take away something today and put it into your strategy or your plan and put it into your practice. Caveat: banana skins. I always give people banana skins at the end of my Wednesday weekly sessions. Number one is there isn't a single solution. And I think we've seen that. There isn't a single solution out there. And we shouldn't think that there's a single solution. We need to be really seeing this as an ecosystem. And the other thing is, you know, not going far enough. I absolutely believe that we need to be courageous and we need to go further than we think we can go with bringing sustainability into transformation. You know, and that's where building our own profile and our own courage and our own credibility, our own leadership acumen is really important, because, you know, I think that we can all go a lot faster than we think we can, and really push ourselves into stretch, not break, but push ourselves into stretch. There we go. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and bring everybody into the room and say, breathe. I hope you're still awake with me. I'm going to stop the recording and thank everybody that is on playback, because I know there's a lot of people. I've had so many emails this morning saying playback. So I'm going to thank everybody for listening to this on playback. And if you've got any questions, then, you know, as always, you can send me a direct email.